This is Paul Nobles from Eat to Perform. I am sitting here with April Trap City Blackford. April, do you want to say hi?
Hi, everybody.
April did not basically do like a bunch of shrugs right before the show. That's what she lives like in real life, you know. Um, but April and I actually were just recently in New York, and we did a seminar that we're going to put together as a charity thing that'll be coming out in Thanksgiving. You guys might see some of the previews. I tried to publish something from Lisbeth Darsh that was really, really good, but my internet provider wasn't working all that great. But I think you guys will see like the basic, feed, and then like the well-produced stuff will come a little bit later. But the plan is to have that available as a charity type thing for Black Friday, and so we're kind of excited about that because we think that a lot of people are going to be real interested in that information. But April's role was actually really well. April and her husband's role was really important in the process because we had a body fat testing machine at CrossFit New York City on the black box, and the cord for the electrical cord that goes into the body fat machine got damaged in shipping, and so April's husband Tom had to run all around New York to try and find a replacement for it. And luckily he was able to do it, which otherwise, a big reason why a lot of people were there wouldn't have happened. So, so we do have a couple questions right off the bat. And so we'll just kind of get to, excuse me, get to those and get rolling. Is it better to eat white rice instead of sweet potatoes? I have to say that this might be a little controversial, but I say yes. If you ask me what I would choose white rice over sweet potatoes. And the reason why is because for me, it loads a little bit better. Sweet potatoes, eventually they will absorb, but I do feel a little bit more bloated after any type of potato. I don't really feel like sweet potatoes react too differently from white potatoes in my body. I never really noticed a difference. Do you have any thoughts on that, April?
I'm actually exactly the same way. If I'm trying to consume a large amount of carbs, I always go for white rice. Control days when my carbs are 225, 250, I'll usually go for a sweet potato. In general, you're going to get more nutrients from sweet potatoes, but when you're trying to hit a higher level of carbs, you will experience the bloating with it. And if you don't have any issues with it, then I just say go with what you like or prefer.
Yeah, I like that strategy because I think that, if you're going to get in a good amount of calories, it's real easy to get in enough, micronutrients. But if you're going to keep your calories a little bit lower, it's been kind of an interesting conversation that we've been having as a staff because, and I just wanted to bring it up because I think that, some of the advice that we've given has evolved. The thing that has evolved the most is the idea that control days are deficit days. And the thing that made us evolve, I'd venture to say, is activity trackers. And I would, I don't, anything that we'll say, it's not that what we used to say is wrong. It's just what we're saying now is more right, right? And so April, as an example, is relatively new to having a Fitbit, activity tracker, and things of that nature. But when we used to say on your control days, it was like a deficit day and you keep your list high, we were really sort of like coaching people, try to stay active and make sure that your calories are a little bit higher. The problem is that people kind of took that too far a lot of the time. And so they'd be like, oh my God, I'm so starving and this sucks. And when we all got activity trackers, we started realizing why it sucked, because we were still burning 2,600 calories, but we were eating 1,800 calories. I'm talking like a lot of females. I saw you talk to someone today, and you mentioned that they should have a little bit of a deficit on their control days. You mentioned not an extreme deficit, which I think is good, but even in the instance, like the person that you were talking to, I feel like they would be better off eating their Fitbit number on their control days. And I think that happens for a lot of females that are under 150 pounds. Anyone over 150, it's sort of person dependent. But in my view, if you're around 30% as a female, you're relatively lean. Certainly, you have fat that you probably would like to get rid of, but it's certainly not in the dangerous level, even though Bod might tell you that if you're 30.1, it's like extremely, I don't know what their classification is, but it's really judgy. But the reason why I say that, April, is because we're seeing over and over again that Fitbit isn't doing a great job with workouts. And so let's say that person was working out 5 times a week, and you see, and so many people are reporting this, and I think this is the case for you as well, since you started tracking, is the Fitbit is under by 200 to 300 calories a day in situations like yours, and situations like Chantel's, Catherine's. So in the case of Amanda, as an example, who was the person that you were talking to, who works out a lot, right? In theory, she just needs to be at par on her days, and she will be at a deficit based on the average deficit that she's at most of the time. Because she was talking about, she was just trying to eat to her Fitbit numbers, even on her workout days.
No, I think she's actually eating over her Fitbit numbers on her workout days. And the only reason why I suggested that to her was she is over 160 pounds. She's strong, but it wasn't because of that. It was because I've worked with her in the past for quite a few months, and I know where her mindset is, and it just takes a little bit of ease. That's all. I just know where she's coming from. So
she just likes to keep her weight stable. I have to say, I mean, like, her body type is real similar to my wife, right? And Vicky, and in the case of Vicky, I feel like she's too conservative. That if she were to allow for more food, she would gain more muscle and ultimately get leaner as a result. But like you said, for some people, weight becomes a bigger concern than maybe it should be, and it's sort of hard to go against that.
Unfortunately, I think it's a large population of females that they all come from the too conservative background. They're scared. If it's a control day, even if their Fitbit says they burn 1,700 calories and they're hungry, a lot of times they won't listen to their body and actually eat. It's just constantly trying to follow the rules, or, they're afraid, if the scale's up 2 pounds, they think they overate, and then they regress. And, unfortunately, and I was even like that for years. It took me a long time, but now, if I eat 3,500 calories on a rest day, I don't care, because I know, if the scale's up 5 pounds, I know it's not 5 pounds of fat. It's just not science. It's just not going to happen, but not everybody's at that point yet.
Yeah, and I think that the goal of what we're talking about is to sort of get them to that point, and we'll just keep banging that drum, and eventually,
you gotta hold their hand and take them there, and eventually they're gonna be able to walk on their own.
What's sort of interesting about it is that you're like, if I'm up, X amount of pounds, I'm no different. I mean, my journal is in Boogie Borders, along with all the other people. I mean, I can't remember. Well, I wrote an article and it's coming out this week, but it talked about how Eat to Perform coaches, we're in the same groups, we're in the same forums, we're talking about the same issues that you guys have. I mean, I like to stay right around 170. This morning I was at 171.8. I know exactly what it was. And to a certain extent, I've been in New York. I was able to keep my activity level pretty high, and so I was able to eat pretty freely. But then towards the end of the trip, I got sick. You can kind of hear it in my voice. And I'm sort of recovering from that. So a lot of my activity has been sort of compromised by just trying to recover. And even though you know that you need to rest, even though you know that the scale is going to go up, even though you know all the science and stuff like that, I'd be lying if I said it doesn't bug me a little bit. You know what I mean? But on the same note, I am able to go, okay, I'm still going to do the right thing for myself. I think one of the things the other day was, I almost talked myself into working out. And then I thought, well, what would you tell everybody else to do? And then I did the right thing, and I think we all kind of need to hear that. I mean, the idea of working out at 60%, there's just another day you can work out. It's just not that big of a deal, but you sort of get into this mode, like you said, you don't want to be rigid, but you are sometimes governed by those rigid thoughts, even as you get better and better at this. And you still have to fight those battles mentally. And that's just part of the deal.
I think you're cursed by the 0.8 and the 0.2.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys saw that, but
yeah.
but I mean, was I crazy there? Because like I can't tell you how many times, I mean, this does probably like expose people to a level of crazy that they would rather not know. But I mean, if I'm at like 170.2, there are times where I will just go with no coffee for a half hour, try to go to the bathroom just to get to 169.8, even though it really doesn't matter like at all in the overall scheme of things. And ultimately, you're just basically dehydrating your body. It's not like body fat or anything like that. But mentally, I feel like if I'm close, but the problem is in my scale, like for instance, if I was 170.2, I don't want to get to 170, right? I want to get to 169.8. And it's like, I think I better just have coffee, and move on. But yeah, so I mean, those things still bug me. And I like to say those things because I like for people to understand that we have the same struggles that they have, and I think that's important for people to hear. Unless, of course, April, you think it's too crazy and I shouldn't say stuff like that.
No, I have my own craziness as well.
Yeah. So Amin is saying, what is your take on training with the group during the WOD versus one-on-one personal training with a CrossFit coach if the goal is losing 60 to 70 pounds? It sort of depends on how that looks. But I sort of like a combination of both. And I don't know if you work out at CrossFit NYC or not, because that sounds like the way that they do it. And so you might actually work out there. But the thing I really loved about their setup was that, and you might not know this, April, I actually went out and worked out there 2 days later, and I hired Catherine as my coach. You know what I'm talking about when I say Catherine? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So how did you like it?
It was really cool, and so that's how I'm going to answer her question. Is I would do a combination of a couple days wadding, a couple days working with a coach, working on skills and working on strength. In the case of somebody that's in your situation, working on 1 rep maxes is probably not the way that I would go. I would really focus on more 5, 7s, and 10s, but that would be up to your coach. The one thing that I would not suggest is a whole bunch of high intensity, because people with a lot of fat to lose, or a lot of fat to use, I mean to say, they don't necessarily benefit from more and more intensity. The other thing that I think is really important is some level of endurance. And what I would probably suggest is having at least one long endurance day, once every 1, maybe 2 weeks. And what I would suggest to you is to do rowing and not running. Um, if that seems like too much, then you could walk, hike. Those types of things are all in play. I like rowing because it's low impact. I also like the Airdyne slow. And what I mean slow is 125 to 140 for heart rate. And that's really different from the way that a lot of people do Airdyne. But I'm talking about, for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, things of that nature. And what I like about, having, a couple days wadding where you're working high intensity, a couple days where you're working with a coach, they're working on skills, they're working on reps, and then you have at least one long endurance day. And what I would do is I would try and separate your long endurance as far away from your like heavy weight training as much as possible. So if you're heavyweight training over here, try and do your long endurance 3-4 days away. And I think that would be a result. Now, you could talk to a coach and they'll give you a good plan with that. She's saying Red Wolf CrossFit in Huntington Beach, California. Well, if you go to the CrossFit Games, you might see me. I work out 6 times a week. I don't have any problem with you working out 6 times a week, but I would have a problem with you working out 6 times a week if you're not seeing a result. Now, the difference between what I would see as a result and what you would see as a result is very different. Because I would be concerned about fat. And so it wouldn't concern me if you were working out and you were doing body fat measurements and things were going in the right direction. She's saying that she's 289 and 22% body fat, but she's 6'1". So, sorry, it's a male. He's 6'1". And so, my guess is that you actually carry the 289 fairly well. And so as a 47-year-old athlete, what I'd really focus on is that you're, seeing some results. So let's say that, have you lost a lot of weight recently? That I'd be interested to know that, because he's been pretty responsive in talking to us throughout this.
He has a crap ton of muscle.
Yeah. See, I lost 60 pounds in the last 5 months. Okay, so the problem with what you're trying to accomplish is, do you have any idea what you're eating right now? Have you been tracking? So he's saying, no, not really. So my guess is it's low, and you're basically kind of burning the candle at both ends, which is fine. That's not a huge issue. You're certainly not the first person to ever do that coming from your background, okay? I would say that, there's some similarities between my former story and your story, okay? But eventually, and I would say eventually meaning kind of soon, is you need to stop dieting for a bit, and you need to take a break for a couple months, probably a month or two. And what I like about taking a 2-month break, I mean, right now we're early July. He's saying I accelerated my fat loss with intermittent fasting. Sometimes fat loss, and I don't, once again, I mean, you had a lot of fats to use. Intermittent fasting would probably be a pretty good tool for you. The thing with intermittent fasting, though, is it makes it easier to kind of eat at a deficit, but it stops working after a certain time. Your body just sort of adjusts to that. And, you're talking to someone that my introduction to the world as a nutrition person was me talking to CrossFitters about intermittent fasting. So I know a lot about intermittent fasting. But what I also know about intermittent fasting is that there's no secret there. Ultimately, it comes down to calories. And what you're finding is that you're seeing a result based on the fact that you're providing your body less than what it needs. So you've lost 50 pounds. What's the secret to continue losing weight? Well, ironically, it's actually kind of reversing out of those patterns for a little bit. Nice thing about the summer is that with the nice weather, actually in your case, it's probably not nice weather. It's hot as hell in California right now. But he's saying my weight loss plateaued for 2 or 3 months, and I have helped break the plateau. Yes, because it gave you a way to eat less comfortably. But now, my guess is if you haven't plateaued right now, you're going to plateau soon. And that's just the way the body works, right? The body's going to figure out, hey, this dude's trying to kill us, and not legitimately, but, the body's going to conserve energy if you continue to, eat in a reductive way. And so the secret to what Eat to Perform is, and the secret for you to continue seeing results, is to kind of reverse out of that and then come back into it. Like we talk a lot about the wave method and how we, take periods of performance-focused fat loss. That's what we're talking about in your scenario. And, if you look at, taking a period of, say, 2 months by, mid-September as an example, you're ready to cut again, then we can lose another 15 pounds, reverse out of that, another 15 pounds, and now you've hit your goal. The problem that you run into, though, is that if you just try and get it all at once, most people don't get there. And, speaking from a person that kind of did something similar to what you did, if you look at, what happened to me after intermittent fasting with not a great, not a super enlightened approach, I was real skinny fat and sort of needed to lift some weights. And, I still ate intermittent fasting, but it wasn't at a deficit. And I like that strategy because it just got to be convenient to have, just a couple meals a day. So I'm going to actually move on because we do have a lot of questions. He's saying, it's hard for me to convince myself to eat more and lose more fat. The concept is called reverse dieting. If you want to take a look, Lane Norton has done a great job. The point isn't to eat more and then gain, saying I signed up for the one-on-one session with a coach, but I've not used it yet. Look forward to it. Thanks, man. I like the shirt. Yeah, no problem. But if you want to take a look at it, we're not the first people to ever talk about reverse dieting, and we're not the first people to talk about a diet break. The problem with diet breaks, though, is I think that too many people focus on diet breaks for a week or two, and it just leads to bad behavior at a time where you're cellularly not available, right? You're not ready for, all the Oreos and all the other type of stuff. And so what we do, as a staff is we walk you through how to reverse diet out safely to where you're not gaining weight. And then as we're adding that work capacity, as we're getting your numbers up more correctly, right? Then we can start looking at a deficit so you can continue down the path you want to go. The way that I described it, I was in New York, and I opened up my presentation talking about someone who mentioned to me that they needed to lose 30 pounds. And, you know, I was like, okay, 30 pounds, that's not that big of a deal. And they were like, well, I need to lose it in 3 months. And I said, well, that's the big deal. And I said, well, what if I could guarantee you that you could lose 45 pounds? And the person I was talking to, she was like, no, that seems like too much weight. I'm like, I don't know. I think you could lose 45 pounds. I said, but, would you be interested? And all of a sudden you kind of see this smile come across her face. And then I said, but here's the key to the 45 pounds. You have to lose your timeline. I don't care what your timeline is, because ultimately it's going to be more sustainable to lose this 45 pounds, if you do it my way. And she's like, okay, well, what's your way? And so I walked her through the process that basically she was going to lose 45 pounds, but in the end, she was going to be down 30 pounds, right? And so what I was walking her through was the scenario that I'm describing to you, Amin, is the idea is that you're going to allow for a little buffer. You're always, whenever you come from a restricted background, if you lose 50 pounds, as an example, a lot of people get caught up in these numbers and they don't allow themselves a little bit of a buffer going up. If you're 289, I might suggest to you that you would allow yourself to go to 295, okay? Then we take 2 to 3 months. My staff will walk you through the numbers of how to reverse diet out of that. And then all of a sudden, we stay weight stable at 295 for a little bit, and then we go down 15 pounds. Then once we're at 280, we go up to 285, and that's how we would do it, right? And then you go, well, what's the timeline here? I don't care what the timeline is, and honestly, you shouldn't either. The whole point is, will this last for life? And, what I've seen over and over, what I saw in my situation before Eat to Perform was people would get caught in these cycles, and basically they would lose a lot of weight and then they would gain it back with interest. And it's this patience and this understanding and this approach. And the nice thing, first of all, what I'm talking about is nowhere near as restrictive as most people do on their own, right? I guarantee you're not eating near, you're probably, as a 289-pound man, you're not eating as much as I eat as a 170-pound man. And you go, well, that's what I need to do to lose fat. And I would argue, no, it's not. That it will ultimately hurt your goals in the long run. And you'd be better off kind of nibbling at the cheese rather than just like nuclear bombing it, right? And that's what people want to do, So I'm going to move on, but I think you get the general idea there. So Aaron's saying, how do you all measure cooked rice? Most nutrition labels are 1/4 of a cup dry, and the servings are more general. Is there a calculation for measuring it out if you make large batches? You know what? I'm going to let April take this one because I do microwave rice, and I'll tell you exactly what I just did. I microwaved that rice. I measured it in a bowl, and then basically I ate 1/4 of that measurement, and that's how I came up with my measurement. So I am the worst person to ask about rice. So April, take it away.
Depending on the variety that you're using, just basic white rice, 1/4 of a cup of dry will usually equate to 3/4 of a cup cooked. However, I would actually suggest if you are measuring with a measuring cup, just measure a cup and search for a cooked entry on MyFitnessPal, whatever tracking site you're using. Because as long as you're using a cooked entry versus a dry entry, you should be fine. 1 cup of cooked rice will give you approximately 46 to 50 grams of carbs, either way.
Gotcha. Okay, so that should answer that question. But Aaron, if you have a follow-up, just hit us up or ask us in the Boogie Borders. I think he's in, I'm pretty sure that's Aaron that's in Boogie Borders. And now in the Wave group. Let's see, Erica is saying, do you think there's an ideal body fat percentage range for the ETP plan to work? Is it possible for someone to have too much or too little body fat for the ETP program to be effective? No, we've seen both sides do well with it. What you're really asking is if you're somehow an outlier or you're somehow special. And I make the argument that you're not. I make the argument that your body wants to be fed no matter where you are, right? And so let's say that you are overeating. Your body wants to go back to, eating a normal amount, not an excessive amount. If you're under eating, your body's going to want to eat enough to get you through the day. And so, we've had, like Shannon as an example, she went from 255, I think she's 175 right now. So that would be an extreme example. One way, I mean, we could list them off, just tons. But, the best example, on the other end would be Dan Horan. When we started working with Danny, she was probably 15, 16%. I think when you see her at the CrossFit Games, you're going to see she's probably 11, 12%. And somewhat that's like the goals that she has as an athlete. A lot of CrossFit Games athletes for females, usually around 15%. Some will go a little bit lower. Just depends on how big they are as an athlete. With CrossFit, there are times where being a certain weight is a bit of an advantage. Even though it is a sport that seemingly rewards a wide range of fitness, the same weight women tend to win stuff. The same weight men tend to win stuff, right? There haven't been these huge outliers. I would say that Annie Thorisdottir is probably an outlier. I would say Camille and Sam Briggs are more the rule, right? They're more 130 to 135. So, if you're looking to win the CrossFit Games as an example, 130 to 135 probably makes some sense. But there's nothing scientifically wrong about what we're doing, okay? There's a lot scientifically wrong about taking an uninformed approach to the zone or an uninformed approach to paleo, right? And so the more informed you can get, the more science, however you choose to eat, whether you're a vegan, whether you're, choose to eat mostly whole foods, there's no advantage to you to view yourself as special or broken, right? And I certainly, would not allow myself to think of myself as broken. And that's what ultimately landed me in the spot where I'm talking to you about what could possibly work for you. And so rather than taking the approach where you might think that nothing could work for you, I would ask you if you've exhausted all options. And so, for me, I was just going to exhaust all options until, there were no options left. She's saying, it's funny you say that. Broken is exactly how I describe myself when asked. Yeah, and I think that I'd be lying to you if I said to you that I didn't have that in my head at some point, because I was hearing all these messages for so long that, a deficit was required. You were going to have to do a lot of cardio. And I did all these things, and I would sometimes have success, but it just wasn't sustainable to eat so little and do so much. And eventually, what's funny about all that stuff, and even like your broken approach, I bet I could take your broken approach and add 3 or 4 things and make it right. And that's actually one of the things that we talk about a lot. April and I talk a lot about in webinars and in talking to clients is whatever you know from the past, don't forget that stuff. that's still helpful. And so, but it's this rigid idea that allows you to think, for instance, if you were looking at a diet system and you see, these great results from someone, and then you go, well, I'm not getting those results, or I can't keep those results. I often wonder, like, what do those people look like 6 weeks later? What do they look like 3 months later? I mean, I can say personally that, if you look at pictures of me now, they don't look vastly different than they did from 3 years ago, right? I think that's the case for anybody that's been doing Eat to Perform for a long time, including April, is, yeah, we might go up or down a little bit, but in general, it's that changing of the mentality that makes a difference. But yeah, I mean, if you think of yourself as broken, and once again, I'm not speaking for you, I'm speaking for myself. It allowed myself to be a victim of circumstance rather than be proactive and seek out enlightenment. What are your thoughts on that, April?
I actually, years ago, I actually thought that I too was broken, where I ate, at a deficit for so many years and literally gained and lost the same 3 pounds over and over again. And eventually I just got to a point where I said, obviously, I'm broken. This is where my body wants to be. It's not going to go anywhere else, when that was absolutely the opposite. I think you have to get the mentality of the quick fixes, everybody wants fast results, but in the reality of it, you've been patient, you've tried a million things or 5 things or whatever the situation is, and none of those work. If you were patient enough to do that, then you have to be patient enough to give it time, because unfortunately, I can say from experience, the magic doesn't happen overnight. Half of, well, actually over half of it, 75% of it is mental. You have to get through the mental part and slowly start feeding your body, and then that's when it starts happening. That's when you can get over the mental barrier that, I can eat, over 2,000 calories rather than 1,200 calories and not gain weight or not get fat or actually feel good working out or actually know what a good workout feels like, versus thinking, the other was the normal, So, I've been there. I thought, I too thought I was broken, but, you're not.
Yeah, I think that what April's pointing out is really important is, it's not that you will never diet again. I mean, I think that that's sort of, I don't know how that has come about. I mean, I know that people are like sick and tired of dieting and they'd rather not do it ever again. And we're not saying that you may never want to eat at a deficit. Certainly we have clients that we coach to eat at a deficit on occasion. The problem is if you are being told that the deficit is the magic, we have a lot of evidence that that's not the case, right? The magic is actually moving the math in your favor. And so if you feel broken or you're hypothyroid or all these other different things that can kind of come up from constantly putting yourself, overworking yourself or undereating, what we're saying is having periods where you are eating, not unrestricted, but eating with a plan that allows for, a reverse out of dieting, and then for a while there kind of hang out there, and then that will put you in a position to actually get fat loss. But here's the key. Every other thing other than Eat to Perform is telling you that the secret is less, 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 less. We're saying that the secret is both more and less, right? And so when you are like what we were talking with Amin, he's not necessarily going to lose, excuse me, he could potentially lose fat by adding muscle in the time that he's not. Now, he probably already has a lot of muscle, but you might not. right? So let's say that you don't have a lot of muscle. Gaining muscle is actually going to be a little bit of your struggle. And so, you know, if let's say that you're, 200 pounds, okay, and you dieted down from 250, and we can keep you weight stable while your work is going up and while your calories are going up. Ultimately, let's say that you did that for 3 months. It's very, very easy for you to be able to gain anywhere from 3 to 6 pounds of muscle in that period of time. That's going to be 1.5 to 3% body fat right there. And then you go, okay, 1.5 to 3%, I'd be down for some of that, but I'd like a little bit more. Well, guess what happens when you add calories and you add work? Now all of a sudden you can sort of flip that switch. The problem right now is when you're just banging on the same hammer, and that's why you feel broken. And that's why we felt broken. And that's why all of this was somewhat enlightening. But what's funny about it is, and April did her research and I did my research, and we sort of became friends, and we developed Eat to Perform together. But in the end, this was not new. And I mentioned this in the seminar this weekend. None of what we're saying is new. This has been taught to 22-year-olds forever. The only difference is that we're telling it to 48-year-olds. And the reason why it works with 48-year-olds, why it works with 22-year-olds, why it works with 78-year-olds is because the body wants to be fed. The body wants to thrive. And the more you can thrive, the better off you be. And so the problem that you run into is not the weight. It's the expectation. It's the timeline. And if you can change that timeline, you can have more results. Let's see. She's mentioning her high weight, her current weight. I mean, honestly, you've done a really good job. She's mentioned her height, dieted down from height weight, and ended up putting myself in the hospital, hoping to avoid major organ damage this time. Yeah, I mean, I think you got to be a little bit forgiving of yourself. I mean, you've come really far, with probably not the most enlightened approach, but who cares, right? You got there. You got to where you need to be. But your body doesn't want to be severely restricted. That's how you ended up in the hospital. So for you to get even lower than where you're at right now, like I said with mean, you do have to allow for a little bit. I mean, like you say right now, you're 210. You might have to allow yourself mentally to get to 215. But that's going to be the thing that brings you ultimately down in the end, right? And so our coaches will walk you through that. But, in your situation, can you tell me how long it took you to go from that top end weight to the weight that you just mentioned, Erica? So yeah, it took you a year. I'm saying to you, if you can change your timeline and you can be a little bit more patient, you probably did a lot of damage, just to your hormones and things of that nature, where it's just you need to chill out for a little bit. And I'm pretty sure that's what your doctors would have told you, even though you probably view yourself as someone that still has some fat to lose or fat to use. I would argue that you've done a great job. You did something that's extremely hard to do, lose over 100 pounds. Okay, and so allowing yourself mentally to become a different person, start doing things. Doesn't need to be CrossFit, doesn't need to be extreme. It just needs to be hard for you, right? And, we can walk you through that process. So, but you have to be patient. You'll have to be patient with us too, because I see a lot of people in your situation that still want fast results. And we're saying that those fast results land you in the hospital. And so if you can change your timeline a little bit, then we can start to work with things. But a little bit of it is that you got to allow yourself to hang out at 210, maybe even go up a little bit, just so you can kind of normalize things for a while. So we do have a bunch of questions, but most of them are from people that we know very well. So I'm imagining they're mostly just commenting rather than asking questions. Let's see, Cheryl was saying, yes, keep banging that drum. She's saying, I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, so if it's redundant, no worries. I've been ETPing for just 7 weeks, but had some weight gain. And Suzanne the mod suggested that I might not be eating enough and asked if I had a Fitbit. Well, I got the Charge HR last week, had no idea how many calories I burn. On a rest day, I'm eating in a 300 to 600 calorie deficit, and on a workout day, 200 to 650 calorie deficit. I do think the Fitbit overcounts my steps a bit, but I really don't think of myself as that active, but I guess I am. Should I get my macros recalculated? Of course, since I'm still in the, oh my God, my weight is so high and none of my clothes fit phase, I don't want to eat more because it's scary. But I also want to build the muscles. I'm seeing the gains. See, what you're missing is the bigger picture, Cheryl. She's saying, but I'm sleeping pretty terribly. You're probably still sleeping pretty terribly because you're eating at a deficit and your body doesn't want you to be eating at a deficit. Should I wait and gain more data before I bother the mods again? I would check in with the mods. I mean, you want to gradually work up, but you want to gradually work up to those numbers. You're actually wrong about the Fitbit. My guess is, as an athlete, just kind of hearing what you're saying, you have more muscle than most people do, and the Fitbit is picking that up. And you're going to start the day with more of a calorie burn than the majority of people would, and so you have to factor that in. That's what I was saying earlier to Amin, is if he's eating less than me as a 170-pound man, logic should step in at some point, right? That he doesn't need to be that extreme. That would be the case for you as well. Remember, the magic is not in staying in a deficit forever, right? That's the scenario that lands you with hormonal problems and all kinds of issues. Your body wants to thrive. Your body wants to be pretty close to what those Fitbit numbers. You may not be able to work up to that immediately, but you're going to want to get there pretty closely. And one of the reasons why is because it'll make any cuts that you do in the future more effective. And so, yeah, a little bit of weight gain. My guess is that the weight gain was really a result of you jumping head first too quickly. I think that happens for a lot of people. I mean, we certainly hear that a lot, where people, they're coming from a restricted background, and they see Eat to Perform, and they see the Rice Krispie treats, and they're like, I would like a Rice Krispie treat. And so, so naturally that turns into pizza, and you start eating a little. That's really not Eat to Perform, though, right? Eat to Perform, we're going to walk you gradually up there, but we can keep your weight stable. It's just a matter of kind of slowly getting there.
I think a lot of times too, it's a matter of what you said, but it's also a matter of, I think a lot of them feel like if they hang out too long on the side of the pool, then they're just going to walk away rather than just going ahead and just jumping in and getting it over with. I think that they kind of have those doubts, and they think that if they don't just do it, then they're not going to do it. They're going to continue to kind of hang out on that deficit. I'm kind of trying to eat more, but I'm scared to get there, type thing. And I think that they're just trying to do it before they change their mind.
Yeah, she said she spent 5 weeks working from 1800 to 2355, and she ate a fair amount of processed foods, and she's going to more whole foods. I have to tell you guys, I mean, we think whole foods is a big deal, okay? April and I eat a lot of whole foods, and, that's not represented in Science Lab Off Topic. And I think if you're new, you sort of like the ability to have that flexibility. And we eat flexible, certainly. And just because I don't eat Rice Krispie treats doesn't mean that I don't have my version of Rice Krispie treats. I like sorbet. I like dark chocolate. Right before this webinar, I had dark chocolate macadamia nuts. So, there are some healthy snacks that you can have that are whole foods, but they're also energy dense. Some would argue that, dark chocolate macadamia nuts is pretty close to paleo, right? So those are some of the things that can add a little energy density that you also might enjoy that, really aren't super processed. And that would be something that I would look at. But yeah, if you just jump in, have a bunch of processed food, you're not going to get the kind of result that you want, especially if you were coming from a restricted background. And so, but it's
I want to bring this up in regards to the whole foods. I actually experimented with a male client who was complaining and came from an overweight background, lost weight, was a little bloated, restricted background, so was kind of scared. Same situation she's in. And I did an experiment for 1 week and had the foods that gave him a food list and said, just eat this. You can choose white rice, just like gluten-free oatmeal, things like that, and ate the exact same calories and the exact same macros, same carbs, everything, and actually lost 6 pounds. 6 pounds on the scale just from, just readjusting some of the foods, but still eating the same macronutrients. So maybe take a step back and see, how certain things are digesting for you and how you feel overall.
I mean, literally within 5 minutes of seeing April, we were at a place that was a paleo restaurant, right? And so, and it wasn't the only paleo restaurant that I ate at in New York. I ate at 3 paleo restaurants, and that doesn't mean that I'm paleo. It doesn't mean, but one thing that paleo certainly has going for it is there's a priority related to whole foods. And so when you're traveling in some place like New York, somebody was asking what is paleo in New York other than U Kitchen. Bear Burger was where I went, and then the Dig In.
That place was awesome. I actually recommended it to Heather in the groups when she was talking about how she eats out for lunch. I'm like, if I lived there, I'd eat there like every freaking day. That's awesome.
Because what Kimberly is saying is U Kitchen, that was one of the best restaurants I've ever eaten in. Like, not paleo, not anything. That restaurant was the bomb, But yeah, I had like a wrap, but it was wrapped with like a bacon shell, not a bacon shell. That would be really good. Egg shell, like or egg. It was almost like a crepe, and then you would eat it. But yeah, that was really, really good. She's mentioned the collard greens. People often get frustrated at paleo restaurants for adding seasoning. That was one of the criticisms that somebody said about Dig In, was that they use too much sodium. I mean, the fact of the matter is that restaurants need to have seasoning, and nobody's going to buy that stuff unseasoned. And so you kind of got to put up with that a little bit. But honestly, as an athlete, it's not as big a concern as you think. I mean, I had a coach at CrossFit NYC complaining about how much sodium. I'm like, dude, you work out all the time. Like, what the hell are you concerned about? The sodium's not going to affect that dude one way or the other. Kimberly was asking a question about being sick. She said she's heard that when you're sick, you should eat more. I agree with that. Coming from a dieting approach, so more at TDEE, I assume, so that your body can use the energy nutrients to help heal itself instead of fuel a workout. What are your thoughts on that? My thoughts is when you're sick, your body craves certain foods, and you should eat those foods. I almost never drink orange juice. I almost never drink something like Gatorade. I almost always drink those things when I'm sick because that's what my body wants. I have sort of moved to more of like none tabs than Gatorade. Gatorade, honestly, you know, I don't know if it's the sugar or what, but it, you know, it's easy to go down, but it doesn't always feel good on my stomach when I'm not feeling well. And so I've sort of moved away from that, but I will 100% have orange juice. My go-to food when I'm sick is pho or pho, the way that it's pronounced. It's basically beef broth, or, well, beef broth in my case. There's chicken broth with rice noodles. It's a Vietnamese, and basically, you know, it's a lot of, yeah, OJ and pho, my two favorite things to eat when sick. Yeah, because it's just calorie dense. Like Kimberly's saying, it it's really the calories that are going to allow you to recover. So your metabolism is going to be kicked in high gear when you're sick, you know, just naturally. I will say, like in my case, I've sort of forced myself to rest more than I would like. I don't think I'm so much sick as I'm worn down. And you know, the only way to recover from that is slowly, you know, and you know, the it's sort of a fine line. You know, I've had a couple workouts that I had to do. Today I did not work out. It was a normal day to not work out. Tomorrow will be optional, because normally I work out on Tuesdays. But I have been gradually feeling better day after day. But you know, it gets a little bit hard to talk. But yeah, no. There are times though where I don't feel like eating when I'm sick, and I think that that's good too. You know, I think your body's kind of saying like, you know, hey, you know, let's kind of get rid of all this bad stuff first, and then, you know, what normally happens in that scenario is I get really, really super hungry once I'm done, and I think all that's kind of normal. You know,
Yeah,
I don't think.
that's generally how I am, where I don't have much of an appetite, and I only want to drink melon Powerade and gluten-free waffles, and that's it. But usually about 3-4 days later, hunger comes back with a vengeance. But the
Yeah.
key is to make sure that you listen to your body instead of just sitting around like, well, wait a minute, why am I so hungry all of a sudden? Duh, you know, you need to eat, you know, go eat some pizza or something, you know, go eat something, you know, that's going to replenish your body of that energy it lost.
I mean, the thing about pizza that a lot of people don't get is that not only is it energy dense, it's like really, really energy dense, but it's also got a lot of sodium. Sodium's not bad for you when you're sick. You know, um, sodium and potassium, you know, we've talked about this in a bunch of webinars, basically basically allow for the electrical bond within your small intestine that delivers the nutrients to, you know, the rest of your body. And so, you know, one of the reasons why you're craving pho and orange juice is because they kind of merge together to get everything to where it goes. So, you know, you can start, you know, getting all the bad stuff out of your body. She's saying, so it's okay to soften up on macros when ill. Then I'm going to tell you something right now. You can hear me straight up on this. I mean, if you look at my food log is public, you know, I would say in the last 3-4 days when I've been sick, I've overate, you know, 3 of those 4 days, you know. So I'm practicing what I preach on this one. Let's see. So Trey is saying, why aren't most of us that are eating under TDE hungry all the time? It seems like if our need for calories is a lot higher than we're eating, our bodies will let us know by telling us to eat. That is incorrect. You can artificially affect your hunger signaling, and this is well known, right? If you eat too much fiber, this is why all the big diets recommend a lot of fiber. And paleo, as an example, is largely based on fat, fiber, and protein, right? What do all those things have in common? they blunt your hunger signaling. And so people go, well, I started Eat to Perform and added more carbohydrates and started doing more stuff, and now my metabolism's on fire. It's like ding, 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 right? You weren't, if you undereat, okay, and you're using a mostly whole foods way of eating without a lot of energy dense sources, you're just artificially messing with your hunger signaling. So your hunger signaling is not going to necessarily come out of the blue, right? You're affecting it. And so when you keep energy dense foods out of the equation, that's why you get the result that you mentioned. Let's see. Jill Sam, what am I mainly looking for my Fitbit to tell me? I've only had a couple weeks. Do I want to get all those steps in every day, even training days? I think what you want your Fitbit to tell you is how many calories you're burning compared to the amount of calories that you're eating. That's the main thing that we want to know here. Focusing on steps doesn't mean a lot to me. Like when I first started doing the Eat the Fitbit challenge, I started off really trying to like, oh yeah, I'm going to show these dudes, you can eat 3,500, 4,000 calories, and then you can do all this walking and hiking and stuff like this. And it was like exhausting. It was exhausting doing all that stuff, and it was exhausting eating all that food. And I was like, you know what? Let's try it the other way, And so naturally, my body burns pretty close to about 2,800 on a daily basis. Lately I've had a few lower days because obviously I haven't, I've been trying to kind of hold back a little bit. And I got to tell you, even sick, there is a tendency for me to want to, get up and do things. It's not that walking my dog or going for a nice peaceful walk or things that I enjoy. It's not that it's like an exercise thing. It's not a burden. Yeah, it's a pattern that I've developed in my life, but there's no argument for not being out in nature. There's no argument for not, if I were doing it for a specific result, maybe you might want to examine that a little bit. But in my example, when I'm not feeling 100%, I just take those walks out of the way a little bit and try and get back to normal, because certainly I think part of the issue was, I was burning the candle at both ends, on vacation in New York, and it kind of caught up to me, which is pretty normal, Did you have anything to say about that, April?
I actually would recommend for Jill to not purposely add in anything extra and just track her normal activity for a couple of weeks and then get an average from there and see where she is. And then at that point, she can see, am I this inactive or am I really, really active, and then adjust from there. I think the issue when people gets the activity trackers is that they see it and then they see, crap, I need to hit this step goal, and they're purposely, adding these expenditures in when they didn't have it before, and sometimes it actually can cause issues.
Yeah, she's asking for an app related to logging weight training. Do you have any recommendations there?
Years ago, I used Gym Boss, and it was pretty good.
Yeah, I don't know. There's nothing that I use that I recommend necessarily. I like to keep it simple though. I mean, like everything that I could do, I could literally write on paper. Which is one of the reasons why I like Windler. April does Hatch. That's also good. She was saying something about, I see small revelation in this process. I've been eating way more, have not gained weight, still feel pretty chubby, clothes don't fit good. I think the point being is that the food eventually, if you choose to cut, once you kind of established a good, working habit of eating an adequate amount and doing a good amount of stuff, what you're going to see is you can reach those goals a lot easier. And that's the part that people, they join and they have fat loss in mind, and they're like, I've been doing Eat to Perform 3 weeks, when does the magic weight loss happen? It's like, well, no, that's not how it works. I mean, you can't eat more food and suddenly lose weight. But the fact that you're eating more food and you're staying weight stable, I say that that's a pretty big PR, And so what that points to is that, if you're looking at a performance-focused fat loss period down the line, it'll be more effective. Let's see. So Tracy's saying, I've recently started training twice a day, not every day, but about 4 times a week. I do not have a Fitbit, but I was thinking of getting one. Typically do a Metcon in the AM, weight training or interval in the afternoon. How much would a Fitbit help to add to my understanding of how many calories? I'm not worried about losing body fat. It's more about gaining muscle. I think that it would allow for you to understand that you're probably burning a lot more calories than you think. My concern with the Fitbit is I don't want to obsess over steps and calories burned and such. Well, you don't have to obsess over calories burned the way that you're thinking. You do want to obsess over calories burned on whether or not you're getting enough food. I think that, where we're trying to change people's mentality is this idea that you have to be eating at a deficit. I'm saying that if you're going to work out and do 2-a-days, you need to be eating an adequate amount of food so your body recovers and adapts to that stimulus. I would argue, like what are you trying to accomplish with the 2-a-days? And what's your age? Are you competing for something? What's your goals? If your goal is to try and get fat loss by working out all the time, my guess is you're going to end up burned out as a result. But a Fitbit would help you there. A Fitbit would tell you. It's not going to be great for your workouts, though. It will. It's more helpful for the period after you work out because your heart rate will still be going and things like that. You'll see like a tapering down that will shock you. But I think it's helpful. I'm pretty optimistic about a product called Amp Strip, which I think will be really helpful. And so, there you go. Excuse me. Danielle was asking, I'm trying to lose 70 pounds. Is working out 4 days a week, 1 hour each time, enough weight training and sometimes hit. New to Eat to Perform, started a month ago, but life got in the way, so I'm back to tracking and hitting macros this week. Well, first of all, like I said earlier, you shouldn't be trying to lose 70 pounds. You should be trying to lose 100 pounds, right? And you try to lose 100 pounds by losing 5 pounds at a time. You break these things off in chunks, and ultimately, what I would need to know, because everybody says, I still have 70 pounds to lose, but they don't tell me that they've already lost 80 pounds. Well, that's pretty important to the story, right? So I would say that if you could break it down into smaller chunks, that's going to be, she's saying I haven't lost lots recently. Can you tell me what your maximum weight was recently, though? And recently being six months to a year. Was it more than it is now? Okay, but you're telling me what your weight is, but you're not. Is that the highest you've ever been? Okay, so it does point to potentially overeating, or at least overeating for a while, maybe being over reliant on processed foods. But you would really start off at the same place somebody coming from an undereating background would, right? We first need to know what you're eating and how much. And then once we've established that, so let's say that you were coming from overeating background, and we get you your total daily energy expenditure. And let's say that even though you weren't tracking, you may have been eating 4,000 calories a day. And then we find out that your total daily energy expenditure should be at, say, 2,800 a day. Well, if you eat 1,200 less calories, you're going to lose fat, right? If you're a little smarter about, your approach, have more protein, adequate amount of fats, some carbohydrates, it will allow for good recovery. You won't feel so lethargic, if you were overly reliant on fats or carbs. They can sometimes both have their downfalls. And, maybe your joints don't feel right, or things of that nature. But I don't have any problem with your workout regimen. But I would say that, if we're looking to, I think good numbers for you would be something like 225 as an example. That would be a goal, I would say, for you that might make some sense, because you're saying that you're 240 to 245. So if you believe you were overeating, prove it to us, right? Eat your total daily energy expenditure and you'll naturally lose fat. That's the way that science works, But a lot of people, even people your size, ultimately, they weren't feeding their body appropriately, meaning they weren't eating an appropriate amount of micronutrients. They weren't eating a certain amount of protein that allowed for protein turnover. And so those are some of the things that we're talking about. So when I'm good about hitting my total daily energy expenditure and macros, I maintain or lose weight. I just feel like I'm not working out enough. If you don't feel like you're working out enough, the best thing is you can do by far is just to add in walks. If you added in a 30-minute walk on a daily basis, you'll do way more for fat loss in your condition than you would ever do by wearing yourself out working out in the gym. If you added in 2 30-minute walks a day, that's basically like 500, 600 calories a day, right? And so, like I said, if you're coming from an overeating background, that's going to make a difference for you. So yeah, I would get with the coaches. It sounds like you already have your macros, but start to bite off these goals in chunks. I think it's some of that, I need to lose 70 pounds, that's actually stopping you. Like you said, you got away from it and now you're back to it. There is no point that anyone should ever be away from Eat to Perform, right? If you're going away from Eat to Perform, all you're doing is saying that you're allowing yourself to to disregard your health, right? We're not a restrictive diet, we're not a restrictive way of eating. All we're saying is that you need to be more conscious of what you're putting in your body. And so, if you allow yourself to, it's this idea that you have rails, that's the problem. And like people say, well, the rails came off and, I was, doing bad stuff for a month. That's the problem. If you believe that you you have rails, then you'll let yourself go. But if you're conscious of the way that you're eating, then you'll be in a better frame of mind, and you can allow yourself 2 to 3 days of non-intuitive eating. Maybe you aren't tracking, but then you get back to normal. It's these months off that cause the big problems. And I just don't feel like those are always the best formula for health. That's the long story short there. So Tammy was saying, Brand new, signed up Friday, have a Fitbit surge, still don't understand how to calculate the calories I spend in my workouts. Have you been in the forums? I CrossFit 4 to 6 times a week, run sporadically, female 56 year, track food in the past and just starting again now. She said, thank you, this has been very informative, see you next week. Tammy, I would say that you need to get in the forums because they're going to set you up with your plan. I think I might miss Kimberly. Kimberly, I like the concept. What about people whose lifestyles are forced to change? I'm getting really frustrated with all these special people. Like everyone feeling like they're special. You're not special. Like there's the, you know, just it. The food is always the food. You're supposed to eat a certain amount of food. There's nothing, you know, AKA medical residency, making stress a huge distractor from fitness. So there's nothing about stress that isn't added by aided by more sleep, more exercise, and more food. That helps stress more than anything. If you undereat, you're going to be more stressed, right? I don't see how the long-term approach will work when things will slowly work against me while I'm slowly working towards fat loss. I don't see how the long-term approach will work when things will slowly work against me while I'm slowly working towards fat loss. I don't understand what she's saying there.
I don't understand that one.
But you're going to have to explain to me why undereating while stressed, while not sleeping well, while going for medical residency is a plus. Make that argument for me, and then we can have a good discussion. But my argument would be, if you're going for medical residency, why are you focused on fat loss, right? Become a doctor, and let's move on. At that point, then we can focus on fat loss. What a lot of people don't realize with medical residency, you know, is you're pretty active, you know? And so I think a lot of people aren't aware of, you know, I mean, if she's got like a Fitbit or something like that, that will be helpful. Jean's saying, yeah, well, medical residency equals no sleep, inconsistent food, and very little time for exercise. Just stick with it during the latter months and after residency is over, says the person who survived residency. Yeah, I mean, the key to residency is to be able to get adequate sleep when you can and to be able to deal with the stress. I think that a lot of people who are going through medical residency don't know how much activity that they're burning. And so they're eating inconsistent meals and they're not eating enough food. They're not getting in an appropriate amount of micronutrients, macronutrients, because they have a big priority. You know, now she was mentioning U-Kitchen. So I know that she has the availability. If she's in New York, you know, there are a lot of good options that aren't available to other people. So in my estimation, don't allow yourself the excuse to not be prepared, you know. But there is no argument, you know, Gene's saying, eat when you can, sleep when you can. I walked 11 miles one night on call. Yeah, I'm telling you, I just can't believe that everybody in New York, I was actually really surprised at how fit everyone was in New York. And, you know, of course, we were in Manhattan and we were in some of the nicer areas. So, you know, fitness is more available to a lot of those people. But I think most New Yorkers are nowhere near aware. I mean, we had multiple days where I was burning close to 4,000 calories and I was eating 4,000 calories. My guess is a lot of people, you know, if you're a medical resident and you're burning 4,000 calories, you're eating 1,800 calories, guess what's going to happen? You're not going to sleep well. You're not going to recover better. You're going to be cranky. You're going to be living on coffee. You're going to be living on energy drinks, you know. And then if you're focused on whole foods, as an example, like you have this magical whole foods thing kind of going over your head, it can kind of color what the true reality is, you know. I'm not saying don't eat whole foods. I'm saying eat whole foods that are also energy dense. So we've gone really long here. I hope I didn't miss anybody. If I did, let's go ahead and saying that makes sense. Thanks. I'm telling you, Kim, if you can focus on, like if you don't have a Fitbit or something that tracks your activity, you should get one big time, because my guess is a lot of the sleep issues that you may have, a lot of the things that are going to make medical residency, those are all solved by eating an appropriate amount of food. And in fact, a lot of your fat loss problems will just naturally fix themselves. But I would not be overly concerned about fat loss during medical residency. I think that, Elizabeth talked about that in her presentation. She talked about the idea of willpower and viewing willpower almost as a jar. And you're spending too much time emptying out your jar with medical residency to try and also empty out your jar a little bit more with fat loss, right? So you're in the right place, but not for the reason that you probably thought, right? So if you can get your food intake in, make sure to get in an adequate amount of whole foods. I mean, one of the things that I've had to do was have most of my salads and micronutrients at lunchtime, especially on days where I'm eating a good amount of food, because I need to get that stuff in. And, sometimes when, I need energy density, salads aren't going to be the best time to do it. So I learned to start eating, my salads and stuff like that a little earlier in the day. That was just a strategy that works for me. You might have a strategy that works for you. So appreciate everybody being here. This went a little bit longer, but we had a great discussion. April, I will see you tomorrow.
Good night, everybody.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.